Caleb Monroe was 37 years old when the woman he loved left him standing alone at the altar in front of 200 people, a pastor with his Bible open, and a string quartet still playing softly because nobody had told them when humiliation was supposed to have a soundtrack. For almost 4 minutes, Caleb stood there in his black tuxedo with a white rose pinned to his lapel, watching the double doors at the back of the chapel, waiting for Naomi to appear. He told himself she was nervous. Then he told himself there had been a problem with the dress. Then he told himself anything except the one thing his body already knew. She was not coming. And when his best man finally walked toward him with a phone in his hand and a face that looked like bad news had aged him 10 years, Caleb took one look at the message on the screen and felt the whole room disappear. Naomi had written only one sentence. "I'm sorry, Caleb, but I can't marry a man who is still trying to become someone." 2 hours later, Caleb learned she had left the chapel in a white limousine with Grant Ellison, a hotel millionaire whose name appeared on buildings, charity boards, and magazine covers. 4 years later, that same Grant Ellison stood in the lobby of the most expensive hotel in the city, smiling beside Naomi as cameras flashed for the grand reopening of his flagship property. He had no idea that the silent black man stepping out of the private elevator in a dark suit was not a guest, not a vendor, not an investor hoping to shake his hand. Caleb Monroe had come back as the hotel's new owner. Before the wedding collapsed, Caleb believed in patience. Not the soft kind people talk about when they have never had to wait for anything real, but the kind built out of long nights, unpaid invoices, delayed permits, and the stubborn belief that the world does not always recognize a man at the same speed he is growing. He had started with nothing polished. No family money. No famous last name. No uncle with a seat on a bank board. His mother cleaned offices downtown for 26 years, and his father drove freight until his knees failed him. Caleb learned early that if a door would not open, you studied the hinges, the frame, the lock, and then built your own way through. By 30, he owned a small renovation company with 3 employees and a rented warehouse that smelled like sawdust, paint, and old rain. He took jobs other contractors ignored. Damaged storefronts. Burned out rental units. Old apartment buildings with bad wiring and worse owners. He was good at seeing what a place could become after everyone else had decided what it was. That was his gift. He could walk into a ruined room, touch a cracked wall, look at a ceiling with water stains blooming across it, and already see the finished shape in his mind. Naomi used to love that about him. She met him during a charity remodel at a women's shelter where she had volunteered twice a week. She was beautiful in a way that made people look twice and then pretend they had not. Long dark hair, soft brown eyes, a voice that could make a complaint sound like music. Caleb remembered the first time she walked through the shelter hallway carrying donated blankets. She stopped beside him while he was repairing a doorframe and asked if he always worked that carefully on things nobody would notice. Caleb had looked up from the hinge. "The door will notice." She laughed. That laugh did something to him. For 3 years, Caleb loved her with the serious devotion of a man who did not give his heart easily. He fixed her mother's porch without charging a dime. He drove 40 minutes every Sunday to have dinner with her family. He listened to her dreams about opening a boutique event planning company and helped her build the first website himself, even though he barely knew what he was doing. When she cried because her friends were getting engaged to doctors, attorneys, and men who took vacations without checking their accounts first, Caleb held her and promised her their life would not always be this hard. "I know," Naomi would say. But sometimes, when she said it, she looked away. The proposal happened at the old Bellamy Hotel. The Bellamy had once been the jewel of downtown, a 12-story limestone building with brass elevators, arched windows, and a ballroom where governors, singers, and movie stars had once danced beneath crystal chandeliers. By the time Caleb brought Naomi there, the place had been closed for almost a decade. The windows were dark. The carpets were ruined. The lobby smelled of dust and water damage. Most people called it an eyesore. Caleb called it potential. He had gotten permission from the property manager to walk through because he was bidding on minor stabilization work. Naomi came with him, wearing jeans, boots, and the kind of smile that made him believe she could see what he saw. They stood in the ballroom under a chandelier wrapped in plastic sheeting, and Caleb told her the truth. One day, he said, looking up at the ceiling, somebody is going to bring this place back. Naomi smiled. Somebody? He turned to her. Me. She laughed, but gently. You want to buy a hotel now? Not now. When? When I'm ready. She looked around at the cracked plaster, the faded walls, the dust floating in the light from the boarded windows. That's a big dream, Caleb. He took the ring from his pocket then. Not a large diamond. Not the kind that stopped rooms. But it was clean, beautiful, paid for in full, and chosen with the care he gave everything that mattered. Naomi covered her mouth when she saw it. I know I'm not where I'm going yet, he said. But I know who I want beside me when I get there. For a moment, he saw tears in her eyes and believed they meant forever. She said yes. The wedding was planned for the following spring. Naomi wanted elegance. Caleb wanted whatever made her happy. He worked longer hours, took 2 extra commercial jobs, and sold a truck he loved to help pay deposits. His mother warned him once, quietly, that love did not require a man to bleed money to prove himself. Caleb kissed her cheek and told her Naomi deserved a beautiful day. His mother looked at him the way mothers look when they know a lesson is coming and hate that they cannot stop it. Grant Ellison entered their lives 3 months before the wedding. He appeared first as a client. Naomi had landed a contract to help coordinate a private investor reception at one of Grant's luxury properties. She came home glowing that night, talking about the marble lobby, the rooftop restaurant, the way people moved when they had real money behind them. He owns 6 hotels, she said, setting her purse on Caleb's kitchen counter. Caleb was reviewing a materials invoice. Good for him. You should see how people treat him. It's different. Caleb looked up. Different how? Naomi shrugged, but she was smiling. Like he already won. That sentence stayed with him. After that, Grant's name came up more often. Grant had introduced her to a florist. Grant had complimented her taste. Grant thought her event company had potential. Grant said she should be working with higher-end clients. Grant invited her to tour his newest property. Grant knew people who could change her life. At first, Caleb did not feel threatened. He trusted Naomi. More than that, he trusted what they had survived together. Late bills. Long nights. The small humiliations of building something from the ground up while everyone else measured you by what had not arrived yet. He thought their struggle had made them stronger. He did not understand that for Naomi, struggle had become something she wanted to escape, not something she wanted to honor. The week before the wedding, Caleb noticed she stopped asking about the future in the same way. She still talked about marriage, the honeymoon, the seating chart. But when he spoke about buying distressed properties, expanding his company, maybe one day pursuing the Bellamy Hotel if it ever came back to market, she smiled like she was listening to a child describe a castle in the clouds. You're always one day away from something, she said one night. He looked at her from across the table. What does that mean? It means I'm tired, Caleb. Of what? Waiting. He sat back slowly. She softened immediately and reached for his hand. I didn't mean it like that. But she had. On the morning of the wedding, Caleb woke before sunrise in the small apartment he had refused to leave until his business was strong enough to justify a house. His tuxedo hung on the closet door. His shoes were polished. His vows were folded into the inside pocket of his jacket, written by hand because he did not want to read something printed. He made coffee, stood by the window, and watched the city slowly brighten. His best man, Andre, arrived at 8 with breakfast neither of them ate. You nervous? Andre asked. Caleb smiled. No. You should be. Marriage is serious business. I know who I'm marrying. Andre looked at him for a moment, then nodded. All right. By noon, the chapel was full. Naomi's family on one side. Caleb's on the other. The flowers were white and gold. The music was soft. Caleb stood at the altar beside Andre, his mother in the front row dabbing her eyes before anything had even happened. He saw his father sitting stiffly in his good suit, proud but trying not to show too much of it. The pastor smiled. "Ready?" Caleb nodded. The music changed. Everyone stood. The doors did not open. At first, people smiled. A delay at a wedding is not unusual. Someone whispered. Someone laughed softly. The violinist kept playing. Caleb looked toward the doors with patient affection. Naomi was dramatic sometimes. Maybe she wanted the entrance perfect. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 4. The wedding coordinator appeared near the side aisle, pale and whispering into a headset. Caleb's mother stopped crying. Andre's phone buzzed. He looked at it, frowned, then stepped away. When he came back, the color had left his face. "Caleb," he said quietly. Caleb did not look at him. "What?" "Man." That one word did more damage than a scream. Andre handed him the phone. The message was from Naomi. "I'm sorry, Caleb, but I can't marry a man who is still trying to become someone." Caleb read it once. Then again. He heard someone behind him ask what was happening. He heard the pastor clear his throat. He heard the music finally stumble and stop. He looked at the chapel doors, still closed, still white, still waiting for a bride who had already left. His father stood. His mother covered her mouth. Caleb handed the phone back to Andre. He reached into his jacket, removed his handwritten vows, folded them once, and placed them inside the Bible on the altar. Then he walked out. Nobody stopped him. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and cruel. Caleb stood on the church steps while guests murmured behind him. He loosened his tie, but his hands were steady. Andre came out a moment later. "I found out where she went," Andre said. Caleb looked at him. Andre swallowed. Grant Ellison. White limousine. They left through the back entrance before the ceremony started. For a moment, Caleb felt something inside him attempt to break. Then it did not. That was the thing he remembered most later. Not the humiliation. Not the anger. Not even the betrayal. The surprise of discovering there was a place inside him the moment could not reach. He looked at Andre. "Take my mother home." "Where are you going?" Caleb looked down at the steps, then at the street beyond them. "To work." And he did. That night, while people were still calling, texting, whispering, and choosing sides, Caleb changed out of his tuxedo, put on work pants and boots, and went to a fire-damaged grocery store his company had been hired to stabilize. He worked until 3 in the morning tearing out ruined shelving and smoke-blackened drywall. Every swing of the hammer landed clean. Every board he carried gave his hands something to do that was not reaching backward into the wreckage of the day. By sunrise, he had made a decision. He would never again beg anyone to believe in the man he was becoming. He would simply become him. The first year after Naomi left was brutal. Not because Caleb fell apart. He did not give people that satisfaction. He worked. He took contracts he would have refused before. He slept in his office when projects ran late. He learned commercial financing, zoning law, tax lien sales, hotel asset structures, and distressed property acquisition with the same intensity he once gave to framing walls and repairing foundations. He stopped speaking about dreams and started building systems. People thought he had become cold. He had not. He had become precise. Naomi married Grant 10 months after leaving Caleb at the altar. The wedding took place in Italy and appeared in a luxury lifestyle magazine under the headline "A Modern Fairy Tale." Caleb saw the cover while standing in line at a gas station buying black coffee before a 5 a.m. site visit. Naomi wore a designer gown. Grant stood beside her on a terrace overlooking Lake Como, one hand at her waist, smiling like a man who had purchased the weather. The cashier noticed Caleb looking. "Beautiful couple," she said. Caleb paid for the coffee. "I'm sure." 2 years passed. Caleb's company grew from small renovations into full-scale redevelopment. Not overnight. Nothing real happens overnight. He bought a boarded-up duplex, restored it, rented it. Then a 6-unit building. Then an old medical office. Then a warehouse no bank wanted to touch because the environmental report scared lazy investors. Caleb read the report himself, hired the right people, fixed the problem, and sold the building for triple what he paid. His reputation changed quietly. Men who used to delay his invoices began returning his calls. Bankers who once told him his company lacked scale started inviting him to lunch. City officials learned that when Caleb Monroe said a project would be finished, it got finished. He did not overpromise. He did not flatter. He did not perform wealth. He studied broken things and made them valuable. Then the Bellamy Hotel came back to market. It happened through bankruptcy court. Grant Ellison had bought it 18 months earlier through one of his hospitality companies. He had announced a grand restoration, hosted a press conference in the dust-covered lobby, and promised to return the Bellamy to its former glory. The photographs had been impressive. Grant in a navy suit. Naomi beside him in a cream dress. A gold shovel ceremony for a renovation that barely began. Then interest rates shifted. 2 of Grant's properties underperformed. A lender called a note. Contractors filed liens. The Bellamy became trapped inside a web of debt, ego, and bad timing. Caleb read the first legal notice at 6:20 on a Monday morning. He sat alone in his office for almost 10 minutes. Not because he was shocked. Because he recognized the shape of a door. For 4 months, Caleb moved quietly. He did not bid loudly. He did not let his name appear where Grant might see it. He used a holding company advised by a retired hotel asset manager named Ruth Bell, a woman with silver hair, sharp glasses, and no patience for men who confused confidence with competence. Ruth had spent 30 years restructuring distressed hospitality assets. She liked Caleb because he listened, asked good questions, and did not pretend to know things he had only learned yesterday. "You understand what this is?" Ruth asked during their first meeting. "A hotel." She gave him a look. He corrected himself. "A damaged asset with historical value, operational upside, legal complications, and emotional significance I need to keep out of the numbers." Ruth smiled for the first time. "Good. Then maybe you won't embarrass yourself." They acquired the senior debt first. Then contractor liens at a discount. Then a controlling position through the bankruptcy auction when Grant's team assumed no serious bidder would take on the restoration risk. By the time anyone connected the holding company to Caleb Monroe, the deal was already past the point of stopping. Caleb did not celebrate when the court approved the sale. He drove to the Bellamy at dusk and stood across the street, looking up at the limestone facade. The boards were still over some windows. Scaffolding climbed one side. The old brass sign above the entrance had been removed and placed in storage. The building looked tired, wounded, waiting. He remembered Naomi standing beside him in the ballroom years ago. "That's a big dream, Caleb." He crossed the street, unlocked the side entrance, and went inside. Dust hung in the air. His footsteps echoed through the lobby. The building smelled the same as it had when he proposed: old wood, plaster, damp stone, possibility. Caleb walked into the ballroom and stood beneath the chandelier still wrapped in plastic. He looked at the place where he had knelt. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened there. Not because he wanted Naomi back. He did not. Not because he wanted to punish Grant. That was too small. But because the man who had stood in this room with a ring in his hand deserved to be acknowledged. He had not been foolish for believing. He had not been weak for loving. He had simply offered forever to someone who could only recognize finished things. Caleb looked up at the chandelier. Then he got to work. The restoration took 14 months. Caleb was on site almost every day. He hired craftsmen instead of shortcuts. He restored the brass elevators, repaired the plaster moldings, salvaged original tile where possible, and rebuilt what could not be saved. He turned the old rooftop mechanical space into a restaurant terrace overlooking the city. He converted unused offices into suites. He brought in local artists, not because it was trendy, but because the Bellamy had always belonged to the city before men like Grant tried to turn it into a trophy. The project became news. At first, business reporters wrote about the mysterious ownership group rescuing the Bellamy after Grant Ellison's failed redevelopment. Then they wrote about the speed and quality of the restoration. Then someone leaked that Caleb Monroe was behind it. The tone changed immediately. The abandoned groom had become a real estate force. The man left at the altar by Naomi Voss, now Naomi Ellison, owned the hotel her millionaire husband had lost. Caleb ignored most of it. But Grant did not. Grant called first. Caleb did not answer. Then Grant's attorney called Ruth. Ruth listened for 3 minutes, said no, and hung up. Then Naomi sent a text. Caleb stared at her name on the screen for a long time before opening it. Caleb, I know this must feel complicated. I'd like to talk before the reopening. There are things you never understood. He almost replied. Instead, he put the phone face down. The grand reopening of the Bellamy Hotel was scheduled for a Friday evening in October. Invitations had gone out to investors, city officials, journalists, and old society families who still liked to pretend they had never abandoned downtown when it stopped flattering them. Caleb had not invited Grant or Naomi. They came anyway. Of course they did. They arrived at 7:15 in a black car with tinted windows. Grant stepped out first, wearing a perfectly fitted tuxedo and the fixed smile of a man determined to behave as if he had not lost. Naomi followed in a silver gown, diamonds at her ears, hair swept back, posture flawless. Cameras turned toward them immediately. Reporters loved tension, especially when it wore formal clothes. Caleb watched from the mezzanine above the lobby. The Bellamy had come alive around him. Warm light spilled from restored chandeliers. The marble floors shone. A pianist played near the grand staircase. Guests moved through the lobby with champagne glasses, looking up at the ceiling, touching banisters, saying over and over that they could not believe someone had saved the place. Ruth stood beside Caleb, holding a glass of sparkling water. Your ghosts just walked in, she said. Caleb looked down at Grant and Naomi. No, he said. Just guests. Ruth smiled. That's healthier than I expected. Grant spotted him first. Caleb saw the exact moment recognition turned into calculation. Grant whispered something to Naomi. She looked up. Their eyes met across the lobby. For a second, the years folded in on themselves. The chapel doors. The text message. The white limousine. The magazine cover. The gas station coffee. The bankruptcy notice. The ballroom dust. All of it passed through Caleb and left him standing exactly where he was. He descended the staircase slowly. People turned as he came down. Not because he demanded attention. Because ownership has a silence of its own when worn by a man who no longer needs permission. Grant extended his hand when Caleb reached them. Caleb, he said warmly, too warmly. Congratulations. Truly impressive work. Caleb looked at his hand, then shook it once. Grant. Naomi's smile trembled at the edges. Hello, Caleb. Naomi. She looked around the lobby. You did it. Yes. I always knew you were talented. Caleb almost laughed, but did not. That was the mercy he gave her. Grant cleared his throat. I'll admit, when I heard your group had taken over the Bellamy, I was surprised.
I imagine. No hard feelings, I hope. Business is business.
Caleb looked at him.
Is that what this was? Grant's smile thinned. Naomi touched his arm.
Caleb, not here.
He turned to her. This is my hotel.
Where would you prefer?
The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Grant heard them. Naomi heard them. So did three people standing close enough to pretend they had not. Grant's face tightened. Your hotel. Caleb nodded. Mine. Naomi looked down briefly, then back up at him. Can we speak privately?
Ruth, who had drifted nearby with surgical timing, said, "The owner's office is available."
Caleb glanced at her. Ruth looked innocent.
5 minutes later, Caleb stood in the restored owner's office behind the mezzanine, facing the two people who had once turned his humiliation into the first chapter of their fairy tale. Grant walked to the window, looked out over the lobby, then turned with a corporate smile.
I'm going to be direct. I want to buy back into the Bellamy. Caleb said nothing. Grant continued, minority position. Hospitality operations support. My company still has relationships that could be useful. No. Grant blinked. You haven't heard the proposal. I heard enough. Naomi stepped forward.
Caleb, please don't make this about the past.
He looked at her. I didn't bring the past here. You did.
Grant's voice sharpened. This hotel was my project first.
Caleb turned to him fully. No. It was your announcement first. There's a difference. Grant's jaw worked. Caleb continued, calm and even.
You bought the Bellamy with borrowed money, underfunded the restoration, missed contractor payments, ignored preservation requirements, and let liens stack up until the court took the decision out of your hands.
You didn't lose this hotel to me, Grant. You lost it before I arrived. The words landed clean. Naomi looked at Grant, and something moved across her face. Not surprise exactly.
More like confirmation of a truth she had spent months avoiding.
Grant pointed a finger toward Caleb. You think owning one hotel makes you me?
Caleb smiled faintly.
No. That's why I bought it. Grant stepped closer.
You're still that same contractor she left at the altar.
For the first time, Caleb felt real anger rise. Not wild anger.
Not the kind that makes a man lose control.
A quiet, focused heat.
Yes, Caleb said.
I am.
I'm the same man who stood there while 200 people watched him be humiliated. The same man who went to work that night instead of begging her to come back. The same man who learned every part of this business while you were borrowing against your own reflection. The same man who bought your debt, cleared your liens, paid the contractors you stiffed, and restored the building you used for a press conference.
Grant said nothing. Caleb stepped closer now. So yes, I'm still that man. That was your mistake. You thought leaving me there ended something. Naomi's eyes filled with tears.
Caleb turned to her. And you thought you were choosing a finished life. She whispered, I was scared.
I know. You were always chasing something. I was building something. I couldn't see it then.
No, he said.
You could see it. You just didn't want to wait for it. She looked away. Grant laughed bitterly. This is sentimental nonsense.
Caleb walked to the desk, opened a leather folder, and removed a document.
No, he said. This is the part you understand. He placed the document on the desk. Grant looked at it. His expression changed.
It was a formal notice from the Bellamy ownership group banning Grant Ellison from pursuing any operational, investment, management, or vendor relationship with the property due to unresolved liabilities from the failed prior redevelopment.
Grant picked it up slowly. You can't be serious. I am. This is personal. It is documented. You're embarrassing yourself. Caleb looked at him for a long second.
Grant, you came uninvited to a hotel you lost, asked to buy your way back into a project you damaged, insulted the man who owns it, and brought my former fiancée as if the sight of her still had negotiating value.
One of us is embarrassing himself. It is not me. Naomi closed her eyes. Grant's face reddened. Caleb opened the office door.
The event is downstairs. You can enjoy one drink, offer one polite congratulations for the cameras, and leave through the front door with dignity.
Or security can help you find the side exit. For a moment, Grant looked like he might say something foolish enough to become memorable. Then Naomi touched his arm.
Let's go, she said quietly. He looked at her, stunned by the firmness in her voice.
Naomi, now. They left the office.
Caleb stayed behind for a moment, looking at the closed door. His hands were steady, but his chest felt heavy.
Not with regret. With release.
Some rooms take years to exit, even after you have physically walked out of them. When he returned to the lobby, the mayor was waiting to shake his hand.
Cameras flashed.
Guests applauded when the restored ballroom doors opened for the first time. The chandelier, cleaned and repaired, burned with 1,000 points of light.
People stepped inside and gasped. Caleb stood at the entrance. He remembered kneeling there with a ring. Then he watched the room fill with life.
Later that night, after the speeches ended and the last guests drifted toward the rooftop, Caleb found his mother sitting alone in the ballroom.
She wore a deep blue dress and the pearl earrings his father had bought her for their 30th anniversary. She looked up as Caleb approached. "You did good," she said. He sat beside her. "You think so?" "I know so." They sat quietly for a while. His mother looked toward the chandelier. "This where you asked her?" "Yes." "And now?" Caleb looked around the ballroom, at the restored walls, the polished floor, the musicians packing up near the stage, the staff moving with quiet pride through a place no longer abandoned. "Now it's just a room I finished." His mother smiled. Across the lobby, Naomi watched him from near the front doors. Grant was outside already, speaking sharply into his phone. Naomi stood alone in her silver dress, looking smaller than she had when she entered. For a moment, Caleb thought she might come back. She did not. She only looked at him, nodded once, and left. He wished her peace then. Not because she had earned it from him. Because he was tired of carrying her absence as proof of anything. 1 year later, the Bellamy Hotel was profitable. Not just beautiful. Profitable. The rooftop restaurant was booked 3 months out. The ballroom hosted weddings almost every weekend. The suites drew travelers who wanted history instead of glassbox luxury. Caleb's redevelopment firm moved into offices on the second floor, overlooking the street where he had once stood and stared at a ruined building with a dream nobody respected. Grant Ellison's hotel group continued shrinking. 2 properties sold. 1 lawsuit settled quietly. His name still appeared in certain circles, but with less shine. Naomi filed for separation 8 months after the Bellamy reopening. Caleb heard about it from Andre, who delivered the news with the careful tone of a man offering information, not gossip. "You okay?" Andre asked. Caleb looked over a set of plans on his desk. "Why wouldn't I be?" Andre grinned. "Look at you. Mature and annoying." Caleb laughed. That afternoon, he walked through the hotel alone. He liked doing that sometimes. Not as an owner inspecting property, but as a builder remembering the work. He ran his hand along the restored banister.
He nodded to the concierge. He paused near the ballroom doors where a wedding party was preparing for a ceremony.
The groom stood near the entrance, nervous, adjusting his cuffs.
Caleb recognized the look. The young man glanced over.
"Sir, do I look all right?" Caleb smiled. "You look like a man about to find out what matters."
The groom laughed nervously.
"That good or bad?"
"Yes." The ballroom doors opened.
Music began. Everyone stood.
Caleb stepped aside, out of the way, and watched the bride appear. She walked toward the groom with tears in her eyes and certainty on her face. The young man covered his mouth, overwhelmed.
The guests smiled.
The room held its breath for the right reason this time.
Caleb watched for a moment, then turned and walked back into the lobby.
Sunlight poured through the front windows, touching the marble floor, the brass fixtures, the restored sign above the desk.
The Bellamy lived again.
So did he. At the front entrance, a new plaque had been installed that morning.
Simple bronze. No speech. No vanity.
Just a line Caleb had approved after rejecting 20 versions Ruth called too sentimental.
Restored by Monroe Development Group.
Caleb stood in front of it for a long time. Years ago, Naomi had left him because she believed he was still trying to become someone.
Maybe she had been right in one way. He had been becoming someone. A stronger man. A quieter man.
A man who understood that love without loyalty is admiration waiting for a better offer. A man who no longer needed to prove his worth to people who could only recognize success after it had a lobby, a chandelier, and a nameplate. His phone buzzed.
A message from Ruth. "New property packet is on your desk. Looks ugly. You'll probably love it." Caleb smiled.
He looked once more at the lobby, at the hotel Grant had lost, Naomi had doubted, and he had restored. Then he went upstairs to work. Because the best answer to being left behind was not revenge. It was arrival.